I think on the last Bangles tour. It had been 9 years.
Susanna Hoffs was born on January 17, 1959, in Los Angeles to a very unusual family. Her father, Joshua Allen Hoffs, was a well-known psychoanalyst who worked with famous Hollywood stars. Her mother, Tamar Ruth Simon, was one of the few female film directors working in the 1950s. The family lived in a beautiful home in Pacific Palisades that cost $180,000 back then, which would be worth about $1.8 million today. The house was filled with original artwork, movie memorabilia, and constant interesting conversations. Susanna grew up with her two brothers, John and Jesse, in a Jewish household where creative ideas flowed freely. Her mother absolutely loved the Beatles. It wasn't just regular admiration, it became like a way of life for their family. When I Want to Hold Your Hand took over American radio in 1964, their home basically turned into a Beatles shrine. Tamar owned every single and album, even rare bootleg recordings, spending more than $2,000 each year on Beatles music, which equals about $18,000 today. She played Abbey Road every morning while making breakfast and put on Sgt. Pepper's while cooking dinner. The music wasn't just playing in the background, it was everywhere in their daily life. By the time Susanna turned 6 years old, she could harmonize perfectly with any Beatles song. She didn't even realize she was learning the kind of vocal layering techniques that would later help define the Bangles' signature sound. When she was 7, Susanna began taking guitar lessons with her uncle Robert Simon, who was a session guitarist that had worked with famous artists like Sonny and Cher. In 1966, he gave her a small Martin acoustic guitar worth $85, which would cost about $750 today. Every Saturday they practiced together in the family's garage, which had been converted into a small music studio. Within just 2 years, Susanna had learned 47 different nut chord progressions and had written her first original song called Sunshine in My Room. Her uncle kept careful track of all her progress in a leather notebook that still exists today. By age 9, she was already learning advanced jazz chords. This early musical training gave her the skills she would later need to stand out in the male-dominated rock world, not just as a singer, but as a guitarist who could handle both rhythm and lead parts. Dance also played an important role in shaping how Susanna would later carry herself on stage. From age 5 to 12, she trained at the West Side Ballet Academy in Santa Monica. Her monthly classes cost $40, which is around $360 today. Her instructor, Madame Violette Armand, had once danced with the famous Paris Opera Ballet. Through ballet training, Susanna learned how to hold her body with confidence, how to move with grace, and how to keep an audience's attention focused on her. She performed in 3 recitals, including a 1971 performance of The Nutcracker, where she played a snowflake. These years of dance training helped her develop the polished stage presence that would later set her apart from the more chaotic energy of other rock performers in the 1980s. In 1980, Susanna graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, with a degree in art. However, that final decision came after she had experimented with several different majors. She explored dance, theater, film, and sculpture before finally settling on art. It wasn't because she couldn't make up her mind. It was because she had a deep curiosity about every form of creative expression. During the day, she painted and sculpted, but at night, something else was taking shape. She had started writing music with her boyfriend, David Roach, and their band, first called The Psychiatrists, and then The Unconscious, was becoming more than just a side project. Her professors expected her to go into galleries or museums after graduation, but she was already dreaming about playing music full-time. 2 concerts completely changed everything for Susanna's future direction. The first was the Sex Pistols' final show at the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco on January 14, 1978. The concert ended with Johnny Rotten famously asking the crowd if they felt cheated before walking off stage. The second life-changing concert was a performance by Patti Smith, who combined music and poetry in a way that deeply affected Susanna. She later said this was when she felt the full force of the punk and art movement hitting her. It was a major turning point in her thinking. She realized that with just 3 or 4 chords, she could create something raw and real. She remembered listening to the Ramones and thinking to herself, "I can do that." This gave her the courage to move from acoustic guitar to electric and see herself as part of something much bigger than just playing alone. After graduating from college, Susanna shocked everyone by walking away from visual art completely. Her family had expected her to build a career in the arts, maybe working in film like her mother had done. But instead she moved back to Los Angeles and started actively looking for musicians to form a band with. It was a very risky move. In 1980, it wasn't easy for women to break into rock music. Most bands were made up entirely of men, and there weren't many female guitarists performing on stage. But she didn't let these obstacles stop her from pursuing her dream. She relied on the guitar skills her uncle had taught her and maintained the belief that she could create her own path in the music world. In 1981, Susanna Hoffs had just graduated from UC Berkeley with her art degree when she saw a small advertisement in a Los Angeles newspaper. The ad had been placed by Vicki and Debbie Peterson, 2 sisters who were looking for musicians who loved the same bands they did. Susanna definitely fit that description. When they met in a garage in Northridge and started singing together, something immediately clicked between them. That first harmony they created together was all it took to know they had something special. They didn't have a detailed plan for success, but they definitely had natural chemistry, and just like that, a band was born. They called themselves the Supersonic Bangs at first, then shortened it to just the Bangs, and eventually became the Bangles. At the time, rock music was still very much a man's world. 4 women trying to make it while practicing in a garage felt almost impossible to most people. But they kept rehearsing together, kept playing at small clubs, and kept chasing their dream. In 1984, their first album was finally released. Music critics loved it, but unfortunately it didn't sell well. The album peaked at only number 80 on the charts and sold just over 49,000 copies worldwide. They had plenty of praise from reviewers, but no airplay on radio stations. MTV completely ignored them, and radio stations didn't pick up their songs. That meant no money coming in, which meant they all had to keep their day jobs. Even though they were signed to Columbia Records, it didn't feel like real success. They were still broke, playing small clubs at night and working normal jobs during the day. Rent still had to be paid, and groceries still had to be bought. And the record label started to worry about their investment. Some executives began wondering if they'd made a mistake signing an all-female rock band. That worry gradually turned into pressure, and slowly the label started pushing Susanna Hoffs to the front of the group. This wasn't because she wanted to be the star, but because the music industry believed that a single recognizable face sold records better than promoting a group equally. What made the Bangles different from other bands was the special way they sang together. Their harmonies weren't carefully designed or planned out. They discovered them by accident during one of their first garage practice sessions. Each member took turns singing lead vocals, which gave their songs a layered, rich sound that was unique. Hoffs brought a background in experimental music, while the Peterson sisters brought influences from folk and classic rock. Vicki Peterson's jangly guitar style became part of their signature sound. Together they created something that music critics later called neo-psychedelia. But being different and innovative wasn't enough to guarantee success. In the 1980s, all-female bands were often treated as gimmicks rather than serious musicians. Music executives and magazines frequently sexualized them instead of respecting their actual talent. When the Go-Go's appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, they were photographed in their underwear with a caption that read, "Go-Go's put out." That was the kind of environment the Bangles had to work in and try to overcome. Columbia Records began reshaping the band's image, pushing Hoffs forward, while the group's original democratic style was slowly pushed aside. Then came a moment that no one could have predicted. In 1984, Prince wrote a song called Manic Monday. He had originally recorded it as a duet for another group but decided not to release it. 2 years later, he quietly gave the song to the Bangles. He used a fake name, Christopher, to hide his identity. But the choice wasn't random. He had heard their first album and was particularly interested in Hoffs as a performer. He even showed up at one of their live concerts. Hoffs later said the whole experience felt like a fairy tale. Prince didn't bring glass slippers like in Cinderella, but he brought something even better, a hit song that would change everything for the band. That one song completely transformed their career. Manic Monday was released in 1986 and reached number 2 in both the United States and United Kingdom. It opened the door to their second album, Different Light, which sold an incredible 3 million copies in the United States alone. The album also went platinum in Canada and the UK. 5 different singles from that album made it onto the charts. For the first time in their career, they were no longer struggling to be heard. They were everywhere on radio and television. The biggest song from that album turned out to be Walk Like an Egyptian. It hit number 1 in the US, Denmark, and the Netherlands. The song stayed at the top of the Billboard chart for 4 solid weeks and became the number 1 song of the entire year 1987. The music video was nominated for Best Group Video at the MTV Awards. The Bangles were no longer just a garage band practicing in Northridge. They had become global pop stars practically overnight. By 1988, the music world had fully recognized their impact on popular culture. That year, Rickenbacker Guitar Company released a special Susanna Hoffs signature guitar model. It was a limited edition with only 250 instruments ever made. The guitar was unveiled at a major music trade show in Atlanta and cost over $1,000. It featured a unique design that had been personally chosen by Hoffs herself. The guitar became one of the most collectible instruments of the entire decade. This showed that her influence wasn't just about her voice or image. It extended to how people played and understood rock music. However, success came with unexpected problems. Susanna Hoffs had never set out to be the center of attention. The Bangles were meant to be a group where everyone shared the spotlight equally. Susanna, Vicki Peterson, Debbie Peterson, and Michael Steele all sang lead vocals, wrote songs, and played instruments. In the beginning, that's exactly how things worked. But as soon as cameras and photographers showed up, everything started to shift in ways nobody had planned. Since Susanna was shorter than the other band members, photographers naturally placed her in front for group photos. It seemed completely harmless at first, but over time, it made her appear to be the leader of the group. The press noticed this arrangement, fans noticed it, and before long, the band's public image had changed without anyone making a conscious decision about it. Even though she never asked for special treatment, Susanna became the face that people remembered most. And this slowly began to eat away at the strong bond the 4 women had built together. The numbers told a painful story that was hard to ignore. Out of the 7 major singles released under Columbia Records, Susanna sang lead vocals on 5 of them. Manic Monday, Walk Like an Egyptian, Hazy Shade of Winter, In Your Room, and Eternal Flame all became huge hits. Her distinctive soft voice worked particularly well for radio play. Producers and record executives recognized this and kept choosing her to sing lead on their most commercial songs. The Walk Like an Egyptian music video made her even more recognizable to audiences, especially because of her famous eye movements during the performance. Audiences connected with her instantly and personally. By 1988, some radio DJs were actually calling the songs hers alone, rather than crediting the entire band. Many fans began thinking of her as the singer of the Bangles, Asis, without realizing how much the other members had contributed to creating the music. This wasn't something Susanna had planned or asked for, but with each successful hit, The gap between her public profile and the rest of the band kept growing larger. The problem wasn't limited to just the songs themselves. Magazine covers began featuring only Susanna instead of the whole group. Major publications like Rolling Stone, Spin, and various teen magazines all pushed her as the main attraction. Her bandmates, if they appeared in photos at all, were pushed to the corners of the image or left out completely. Reporters stopped asking questions about the group as a whole and focused only on Susanna's private life and personal opinions. Press tours and television appearances followed the same frustrating pattern. Camera operators would zoom in on her face during interviews, and hosts directed their questions only at her. Even when she made conscious efforts to mention the rest of the band and include them in conversations, the media largely ignored these attempts. Her efforts to be inclusive only made her seem more charming to audiences, which ironically made the situation even worse for her bandmates. The rest of the Bangles found themselves stuck in an impossible situation, watching their equal partner become something entirely different in the eyes of the world. By 1988, things were seriously falling apart behind the scenes. What had once been a strong, equal partnership now felt like a divided workplace with growing resentment. During live concerts, Vicki Peterson often spoke to the crowd and helped lead the shows, but the cameras consistently stayed focused on Susanna. The other members felt increasingly invisible to their own audience. Debbie Peterson later admitted in interviews that she simply got used to living with the constant tension. None of the band members knew how to talk about what was happening to their group dynamic. Susanna later reflected that they had no established way to sit down as a group and work through their problems constructively. The emotional damage kept building and building until record executives began seriously suggesting that she should leave the band and go solo. The executives didn't seem to care about what would happen to the other three members. That suggestion was the final push that broke what little unity was left in the group. In 1989, the band officially split up. On the outside, their career looked like nothing but success, but inside, the relationships had quietly collapsed. Then came a movie project that made things even more complicated. On May 1, 1987, the all-nighter hit theaters across the country. It was a beach-themed comedy that had been written and directed by Susanna's own mother, Tamar Simon Hoffs. Susanna starred in the film alongside Joan Cusack, Dede Pfeiffer, and Pam Grier. The budget was relatively small at around $1 million, and the movie didn't perform well at the box office, making just $2.7 million worldwide. However, the damage to the band's unity had already been done. The rest of the Bangles hadn't been involved in the movie project at all. While they were left behind, Susanna was being presented to the public as both a solo recording artist and a budding actress. The film didn't even use any Bangles music in its soundtrack, but that detail didn't matter to public perception. Her image as a solo star separate from the group had already taken firm hold in people's minds. Magazines and talk shows gave her even more individual attention after the movie's release. Both fans and music industry insiders began seeing her as completely separate from the Bangles. Whether she had wanted this outcome or not, Susanna had become something much bigger than the band that had made her famous. One of the most significant moments in this process happened on October 30, 1986, when the Bangles played a concert at the Avalon nightclub in Hollywood. Backstage after the show, Susanna Hoffs met songwriter Tom Kelly. That meeting led to a completely new approach to writing music for her. She had always started creating songs with melodies first, but Kelly and his songwriting partner Billy Steinberg worked in the opposite way, starting with lyrics instead. Together they wrote Eternal Flame, using inspiration from two very real and specific images. One was the eternal flame at Elvis Presley's grave in Graceland, which had actually gone out during a rainy tour that Kelly had taken. The other inspiration was a red light that burned continuously in Steinberg's childhood synagogue in Palm Springs, a light that was never supposed to go out according to religious tradition. The song was released on January 23, 1989, and became the Bangles' second #1 hit. It went gold and topped the charts in 8 other countries around the world. Only legendary groups like the Supremes and the Shangri-Las had achieved multiple #1 hits as all-female bands before them. Just before Eternal Flame was released, another track called Imura In Your Room had already proven Susanna's impressive vocal range to critics and fans. But just as the band reached their absolute peak of commercial success, everything fell apart completely. In 1989, the band members were called to their manager's house for what they thought would be a meeting about planning a tour in Australia. Instead, they walked into a room filled with their lawyer, their publicist, and their management team. The message they received was simple and devastating. It was over. Vicki Peterson later admitted in interviews that she had seen the warning signs of the breakup coming, but had chosen to ignore them, hoping things would somehow work themselves out. Many people in the music industry believed the split was actually pushed by management, who saw Hoffs as having much more potential as a future solo star than the group had as a unit. The managers even offered Michael Steele her own solo recording deal to prevent the band from continuing without Hoffs. By that point, the group members were already emotionally and physically exhausted. They had been touring almost constantly for several years. Tensions had been steadily rising ever since the success of the Different Light album. The band members desperately wanted to be seen and respected as serious musicians, but their biggest commercial hits were often songs written by other people rather than their own compositions. Public perception continued to paint Hoffs as the leader and primary talent, and that perception only deepened the existing cracks between the 4 women. The timing of the breakup couldn't have been worse from a business perspective. The band broke up in the autumn of 1989, just 6 months after Eternal Flame had topped charts all around the world. The aftermath was disappointing for everyone involved. Hoffs' solo career didn't take off the way everyone in the industry had expected it would. Michael Steele's promised solo deal never actually materialized. The Peterson sisters were so emotionally shaken by the whole experience that they left the music business completely, at least for several years. Vicki eventually joined a group called the Continental Drifters, and Debbie started a band called Kindred Spirit, but neither project achieved significant success. For fans and music industry insiders, the breakup made absolutely no sense from a practical standpoint. In 1991, Hoffs released her first solo album titled When You're a Boy. She recorded it at big-name studios in Hollywood with David Kahn serving as producer. Her lead single, My Side of the Bed, reached number 30 on the Billboard charts, which seemed promising. However, the album itself peaked at just number 83 in the United States and number 56 in the United Kingdom. She ended the record with a cover of David Bowie's Boys Keep Swinging, and the album's title actually came from that track. Critics were not kind to the album at all. One reviewer called it a dud, while another dismissed it as airbrushed boredom. Columbia Records released 3 different singles from the album, but none of them made any real commercial impact. By 1996, Hoffs had decided to shift her musical style significantly. Her second solo album was self-titled and featured a much more folk-driven sound. Columbia didn't like this artistic change and dropped her from their roster. London Records picked up the album instead, but the results were still disappointing. The single, All I Want, reached only number 77 on the charts and stayed there for 12 weeks, but it wasn't nearly enough commercial success to save the project. The album was much more personal than her previous work, filled with darker themes and more introspective songwriting. One song, Weak with Love, was written about John Lennon's assassination and its impact on her personally. Critics actually praised this more artistic direction, but the album sold very poorly. Some of the songs had already been rejected by Columbia Records, showing how little faith her original label had in her new musical direction. At the same time her solo career was struggling, something completely unexpected happened that would give her career a strange new twist. Hoffs became part of a fake 1960s band called Ming T. The group included Mike Myers and Matthew Sweet as her bandmates. Myers played the character Austin Powers, Sweet played Sid Belvedere, and Hoffs became Jillian Shagwell. What began as just a silly joke performed in Los Angeles nightclubs eventually turned into full musical performances in all three Austin Powers films. They recorded songs like BBC and Daddy Wasn't There for the movie soundtracks. The group's unusual name came from a strange 1960s Italian film that featured Ursula Andress. The timing worked out perfectly. Hoffs' serious solo career had completely stalled, and Myers was still developing his Austin Powers character for the big screen. Ironically, this completely fictional and silly band ended up being more popular with audiences than her serious solo albums had been. In 1993, an important personal milestone occurred when Hoffs married Jay Roach, who would later become the director of the Austin Powers films. The wedding ceremony took place in Los Angeles, with both her uncle and grandfather, who were both rabbis, officiating the service. Her grandfather told her during the ceremony, "You, my princess, have now brought me a prince." Roach, who had been raised in the Southern Baptist tradition, converted to Judaism before their wedding. The couple had two sons together, one born in 1995 and another in 1998. Roach later went on to direct major Hollywood films like Meet the Parents and serious political films like Recount and Game Change. In a 2023 interview, Hoffs said it took many previous relationships, including romantic involvement with both Prince and actor Donovan Leitch, to finally realize that Jay was the right person for her. Her greatest musical success after the Bangles came through an unexpected partnership project. In 2006, she teamed up with Matthew Sweet to release Under the Covers Volume 1. They performed under the stage names Sid and Susie and recorded 15 classic songs from the 1960s. Both musicians shared a deep love of classic songwriting from that era. Volume 2 came out in 2009 with 16 songs from the 1970s, including tracks originally performed by artists like Carly Simon, Rod Stewart, and Fleetwood Mac. Volume 3, released in 2013, focused specifically on 1980s artists like The Pretenders and The Smiths. Across all three albums combined, they covered songs by 57 different artists, ranging from the Beatles to Prince himself. A special 4-CD box set was later released called Completely Under the Covers, which included bonus tracks and additional material. This collection became her most critically praised work since her time with the Bangles, with many reviewers saying it showed her true artistic strengths. In '99, the Bangles did something that absolutely no one expected after their bitter breakup. After 10 years of not speaking to each other at all, they decided to get back together. However, it wasn't motivated by love, nostalgia, or artistic passion. VH1 offered them $2 million to reunite specifically for a Behind the Music television special. At the time, Susanna Hoffs had been making only about $50,000 per year from her solo work, so that amount of money was life-changing for all of them. The four women met on March 15, 1999 at Sound City Studios in Van Nuys for their first reunion. For the first 3 hours of their time together, they didn't say a single word directly to each other. They only communicated through their manager, with each band member staying in a separate recording booth to avoid direct contact. The tension and unresolved anger were still very real and painful. Then they started playing Manic Monday together for the first time in a decade. That single musical moment somehow broke through all the silence and resentment. Hoffs began crying, and something fundamental shifted between them. The Behind the Music episode pulled in 4.2 million viewers and became VH1's highest-rated episode of that entire year. The success of their television reunion led directly to discussions about recording a new album together. The result was called Doll Revolution, which was released exactly 4 years later on March 15, 2003. The album cost them $500,000 to produce, and they had to borrow that money against their future royalty payments, which was a significant financial risk. Things looked quite bad initially. Only 12,000 copies sold during the first week of release, and critics said the album felt old-fashioned and forced, like they were trying too hard to recapture their past success. But then something strange and unexpected happened. One song from the album, Something That You Said, slowly began catching on with adult contemporary radio stations across the country. It eventually reached number 27 on the charts, which was respectable for a comeback album. That single song literally saved them from complete financial disaster. Hoffs admitted in a 2004 interview that she had actually been looking for a regular day job to pay her bills before the royalty checks from the album finally started arriving. The album eventually sold 180,000 copies worldwide, which wasn't enough to make them stars again, but it proved they still had something valuable to offer audiences. Interestingly, the track that fans loved most from the reunion album, Ask Me No Questions, had actually been written during their original breakup period in 1989, but had never been properly recorded until 2003. Their next album came from a very different and much more humble place. In 2011, they recorded Sweetheart of the Sun in Susanna Hoffs' own kitchen in her Beverly Hills home. They simply couldn't afford proper studio time, so they set up microphones and recording equipment right in her domestic space. Everything had to be scheduled and recorded between 9 o'clock a.m. and 3 p.m. while her children were at school. Producer Matthew Sweet later joked that they even used kitchen pots and pans as makeshift sound panels to improve the acoustics. On November 3, 2010, at exactly 2:47 in the morning, after sharing some wine and late-night musical improvisation, they recorded the album's title track. That completely spontaneous and raw moment turned into what many critics considered their most praised song in 2 decades. The album sold 45,000 copies in its first month of release, which was 3 times more than their record label had expected, and the entire project had cost only $18,000 to make. They used GarageBand software on Hoffs' MacBook Pro for most of the recording. Later, their entire unconventional recording process became the subject of a documentary film called Sweetheart Sessions. Outside of her music career, Susanna Hoffs focused considerable energy and resources on raising her 2 sons properly. Jackson was born in 1994 and Sam in 1987. She spent over $3 million on their education combined, with both boys eventually attending Stanford University. Jackson didn't get accepted to Stanford immediately. He was actually rejected twice before, successfully transferring there in 2014. Just his annual tuition cost $47,000 per year. To help pay for these educational expenses, Hoffs sold her Malibu beach house for $2.1 million. Sam was more academically successful, earning a full academic scholarship to study computer science at Stanford. Jackson now works in Nashville as a music producer and earns about $35,000 per year, following somewhat in his mother's footsteps. Sam took a completely different path, becoming a tech entrepreneur, and by age 25 he was already worth $2.8 million. Hoffs once mentioned that she used to practice guitar in her car during her son's Little League baseball games, so she wouldn't miss those important family moments. Both sons learned to play musical instruments, but only Jackson chose to pursue music professionally. Sam once joked that watching his mother's career struggles had actually cured him of wanting to become a musician himself. One of Hoffs' biggest career turning points came from a completely unexpected source. In July 2011, she was driving to a Bangles rehearsal when she accidentally rear-ended a man named Andrew Brassell at an intersection in Beverly Hills. Instead of just exchanging insurance information and going their separate ways, they began talking about music. Brassell turned out to be a Nashville songwriter, and he played a demo recording for her right there on his phone while they were still at the accident scene. 3 months later, she flew to Nashville to work with him professionally. That random car accident eventually turned into a complete solo album called Someday. The project cost only $75,000 to make, but took 18 months to finish because Hoffs would only record during school hours while her children were in class. Producer Mitchell Froom agreed to work for just $500 per day because he genuinely believed in the quality of the songs they were creating together. When the album was finally released, it received the best reviews of her entire solo career. Rolling Stone magazine called it her masterpiece. The album didn't sell very many copies, just 23,000 total, but it made 400,000 in licensing deals for television shows and films, which proved its artistic value to the entertainment industry. At age 64, Susanna Hoffs surprised everyone yet again by entering a completely different creative field. In April 2023, she released her first novel titled This Bird Has Flown, published by the respected Little, Brown and Company. Critics absolutely loved the book. The New York Times called it a knockout. NPR described it as sweet, tender, and a love letter to music. And the Los Angeles Times praised how original and authentic it felt. Hoffs had kept her novel writing completely secret for years while she worked on perfecting it. The story followed Jane Stark, a 33-year-old broke musician who had achieved only one hit song a decade earlier and now lived with her parents. Readers said the book felt completely honest and was filled with realistic music industry details that could only come from someone who had lived through those experiences. Before the book even reached bookstores, Universal Pictures bought the movie rights, which almost never happens for first-time novelists. Producers Liza Chasin and Bruna Papandrea, who had worked on successful projects like Anatomy of a Scandal, signed on to develop the film. Even more surprising, Hoffs would write the screenplay adaptation herself, rather than having that job given to a professional screenwriter. She called the entire experience a dream come true. The novel was much more than just a simple love story. Jane, the main character, meets a British literature professor named Tom Hardy, not the famous actor, on a flight to London, and their relationship helps her rediscover both her music and herself as a person. The story also explores the dangerous and exploitative side of the music business through a character named Jonesy, who had helped Jane with her original hit, but now wants to control her potential comeback. The book examines whether Jane will chase fame and commercial success or stay true to her artistic vision, a struggle that resonated deeply with many readers who had faced similar choices in their own lives. The literary world took her writing seriously from the beginning. This wasn't just another celebrity publishing a book for attention or quick money. Taylor Jenkins Reid, who wrote the acclaimed novel Daisy Jones the Six, gave it enthusiastic praise, saying, "If you like that book, you'd love this one too." Even Tom Hanks commented publicly about the novel, saying that Hoffs had captured heartbreak, music, and love beautifully in her writing. Critics consistently praised her sharp dialogue and how realistic her characters felt, comparing her favorably to experienced professional authors and saying she demonstrated genuine literary talent. That level of serious critical praise is extremely rare for any first-time novelist, especially one who is primarily known as a musician. Between 2021 and 2025, Hoffs became more creatively productive than she had been in decades. At age 65, she released 3 different albums in just a few years, showing remarkable artistic energy. Bright Lights came out on November 12, 2021, featuring 10 cover songs including a duet with Amy Mann. The album even managed to chart at number 83 in the United Kingdom, proving she still had an international audience. Then, in April 2023, she released The Deep End, which was bold and experimental in its approach. She even reinterpreted the Rolling Stones' controversial song Under My Thumb, completely flipping its meaning to give power to the woman in the relationship instead of the man. In October 2024, she released The Lost Record, which consisted of songs she had originally recorded back in 1999 while she was home raising her baby. The album included contributions from Charlotte Caffey and Jane Wiedlin from the Go-Go's and felt deeply personal, like a musical diary about love, family, and finding meaning at home. On March 26, 2025, she performed at the prestigious Carnegie Hall in New York City. The concert was a tribute to Patti Smith, marking 50 years since Smith's influential album Horses had been released. The stage was packed with legendary musicians. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers played bass, Steve Jordan was on drums, Charlie Sexton played guitar, and Benmont Tench handled keyboards. Hoffs sang Kimberly, a touching song that Smith had written about her sister.